Welcome, Living Word leaders, to the Best Is Yet to Come Table Host Training. We're glad that you're here today. My name is Tim Avery. I'm the president of Cardiac Consulting, and it's my privilege to be able to walk alongside Pastor Steve, Pastor Brian, and John Hilliard as you all make your way through this amazing journey of faith that we're calling the Best Is Yet to Come campaign. So a couple of points as we begin today. Number one, you should have received a handout with this copy of the video. So my encouragement to you would be, if you've not already done so, please print that handout, grab it, and have it right alongside, because I'm sure that you will probably want to take some additional notes as I talk and lead the way through the outlines. So if you would do that, that would be a great first step. Secondly, table host is just kind of a generic term that we're using to refer to those helping to facilitate group discussions, table discussions, that sort of thing. So we'll have table hosts in core communities, mid-sized communities, growth groups, epic events, and the leader commitment event occurring later in November. So the ground that we cover today will apply in a variety of settings. So if you're a growth group leader and I'm referring to table hosts, just know that the basic content that we're covering today will refer to people helping in each one of those settings that I mentioned. Now, if you have your handout, let's go ahead and jump in. We'll try and make our way through this as quickly as possible, but still being effective with our time. What is your primary role as a table host, growth group leader, that sort of thing? I refer to it as a CCO. You know, in business, we refer to CEOs, we have COOs, chief operating officers. In your role as a table host, you're really a CCO, a chief connecting officer. So we want to make sure that you just do your best to ensure an enjoyable experience on the part of each person in your group or at your table. We want you to be familiar with the event flow. What do I mean by event flow? We just mean that ahead of time, we want you to be familiar with understanding what the event is going to comprise in terms of the basic elements. How is it going to flow from beginning to end? Specifically, when will you need to jump in with some of the practical steps of action as it relates to your role as a table host? So we want you to be familiar with some of the materials that will be handed out in each one of your settings. That could include a brochure, a commitment card, the church's mission proposition, which really tells about the content, the reason why, the rationale, the vision, and the specific outcomes and wins of tackling this project that we're calling the Best Is Yet to Come. There's an element called a single charity fund that I want you to be at least a little familiar with. If nothing else, be aware of the fact that it will be discussed in a variety of these settings that we talked about. So a single charity fund is just simply another way of making creative options available for the people at Living Word to be able to support God's great work through this ministry. And what do we mean by creative ways? Well, a single charity fund opens up opportunities for your people to give asset-based gifts. Now, when we talk about asset-based gifts, we're thinking about things like stock, real estate, business interests, things like that. Things that are a bit out of the ordinary, because so many times as we go through these campaigns, people tend to think, well, I will give cash. That's our first kind of default setting for each and every one of us. Yet the realization exists that for most people, our resources that are liquid, that we would call cash, represent about 10% of our total net worth. The rest of that may be wrapped up in real estate, may be wrapped up in investments, stocks, things like that. And so the single charity fund simply provides additional avenues for people to be able to support what God's doing, and specifically right now through the Best Is Yet to Come. The single charity fund also provides an opportunity for people who are employed by employers who match their employees' nonprofit giving. There are many organizations all over the country who will match their employees' nonprofit giving. So having the single charity fund in place through National Christian Foundation affords an opportunity for asset-based gifts on the one hand, matching fund giving on the other hand. And that's really all I'm going to say about this at this point. John Hilliard, in all likelihood, will be providing additional content for you to be familiarizing yourself with as it relates to the single charity fund. For right now, I just want you to know that that's an option that will be discussed in core community settings, in mid-sized communities, growth groups, and those kinds of things. So if people ask you questions about that, just say, you know what? I need to get you connected with John or with another staff member, and we'll make sure that they get matched up with exactly the right people to speak to them and provide keen insight into the situation that they're bringing to the table. So just want you to be aware that the single charity fund will be introduced during this time together. At the Leader Commitment event, one of the key tools, of course, that everyone will be using that night will be the Leader Commitment card. So we'll be asking at the Leader Commitment event leaders to go first in making their commitments. They'll make their commitments a few days prior to the rest of the church. And so having those commitment cards ready to go will be a key element if you're hosting a table at the Leader Commitment event. Now, additionally, a part of your role, I believe, comes right out of Scripture. I love Psalm 84:10. We've all heard it quoted, probably for years and years. It says, "Better is one day in your courts, O Lord, than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper than to dwell in the tents of the wicked." And depending upon the version that you have, it may be doorkeeper, maybe gatekeeper, maybe door holder, that sort of thing. But it all carries with it the same idea. You know, we think of that doorkeeping role as kind of a benign, nondescript role, kind of behind the scenes, that sort of thing. But it's altogether important. Doorkeepers are those people who have been on the inside, if you will. They've tasted of a personal relationship with Jesus. They know the life transformation that they've experienced personally. And they are committed to doing anything that they possibly can, serving the Lord behind the scenes, sometimes in the parking lot, sometimes in the nursery, sometimes in student ministry with Next Gen, that sort of thing. In this case, hosting a table or facilitating a growth group would be your doorkeeping role. And we say, well, why is that important? Well, number one, doorkeepers are willing to do things that other people are unwilling to do. And maybe I could illustrate it this way. A few weeks ago, as I was traveling, I decided to have dinner at an Outback Steakhouse. And if you've been to Outback Steakhouse, you know that in almost every situation, they will have a doorkeeper, someone standing at the front door. They spot you walking across the parking lot, a big smile on their face. They're holding the door for you. They're excited that you're there. They're welcoming you in. And if you just went on first impression, based upon the doorkeeper, you would think that you're about to enter into the finest culinary experience that you've ever known. And that's kind of what we're talking about in this table host, this growth group role. Being a doorkeeper, making a way for others who are not as attached in their understanding and awareness to what God's doing through Living Word. They're not as attached as you are to the best is yet to come, what that entails, what it's all about, those kinds of things. So your ability to hold the door and to do that effectively will play a huge role in growing their awareness, their understanding, and helping them to put down deeper roots of ownership around all that God's doing than ever before. So in a nutshell, that describes the role of the table host or the growth group facilitator. Now, your specific responsibilities, once we get into that venue, into that specific situation, we want to encourage you to extend a warm welcome to everyone who would land at your table. You know, we've all been invited to events or parties or business meetings where when we walk into the room, we realize very, very quickly we don't know anyone else in the room. We don't know a soul. And that can feel awkward, and for some, that can feel quite intimidating, to be honest. Now, most of your people will know one another at Living Word. In all likelihood, they've been attending church, they've been worshiping together, they may be in the same growth group, that sort of thing. But undoubtedly, in creating some of the settings that we're discussing, with the number of people who will be invited, you will have people in all likelihood who are newer to their Living Word experience, who may be attending an event like this for the very first time, and they may know very few, if anybody else at Living Word. So extending a warm welcome. Be smiling, be outgoing. When Roman numeral 2 under responsibilities talks about meeting and greeting, it's making sure that you warmly welcome, that you're keeping an eye out for people who are walking into the room, and you go seek them out, invite them to sit at your table, and then make sure that they are properly introduced to everyone else sitting around the table. We want to make sure that everyone knows one another, that everyone has an enjoyable experience. I would encourage the use of name tags at each one of these events because it's always easier. I don't know about you, but I can go around the table, be introduced to everyone, and 5 minutes later, I've forgotten 3 of the names. So the utilization of name tags always helps to make that a little easier. Roman numeral 3 under responsibility just talks about being with them. And what I mean by that is you are there to serve as either a growth group facilitator, a table host, that sort of thing. And that is your primary mission that night. We've all understood what it means to be talking to a person who's distracted. You know, we may be looking them in the eye, having a conversation, all of a sudden we realize they're looking over our head, they're looking over our shoulder, they're scanning the room to see who else they know or something like that. And that, in a sense, devalues the people with whom we're communicating. So when I'm talking about being with them, I'm talking about the fact that it's not a good time to check email messages. It's not a good time to get updated on Facebook. It's not a good time to text your friends or your kids or coworkers, that sort of thing. My encouragement would be it's a wonderful time to put away our smartphones and to focus solely on the people that God has brought to our table. Roman numeral 4, I want to encourage you to express passion, enthusiasm, and support for your church, for your leadership team. I mean, Pastor Steve, having been there for decades, leading the church in the manner in which he has, filled with integrity, honoring the Lord, God has blessed Living Word with unique and gifted and godly leaders. And Pastor Brian coming right alongside to follow in his steps is an amazing thing. You all have a lot to be passionate about, enthusiastic about, and we just want to encourage you to be very, very supportive of your church leadership team and specifically the Best Is Yet to Come campaign. You know, frequently my wife and I will shop at Costco, and I don't know if you shop there or not, but we absolutely love it. And we've got a good friend that we've come to know over years. His name is Albert, who works at a greeter at Costco. And so it doesn't matter who's walking across the parking lot. You can be 50 yards away. As soon as he spots you, if he knows your name, he will call out your name. Welcome to Costco. You're going to have the greatest shopping experience you've ever known. Now get in here, get your cart, let's get you going. He's so passionate and enthusiastic about his role and responsibility and his belief in the value that you will derive as a result of being a Costco customer and shopping that day at Costco. And we want you to be not overly fakey. I'm searching for the right word here. We don't want you to fake it, but You have a lot for which to be thankful and enthusiastic. So we just want to encourage you to allow that passion, that enthusiasm, that sense of excitement to permeate the tone in your voice, your conversation, and everything that occurs in that setting as you host a table or lead a group. You know, one of the best ways that you can do that is really Roman numeral 5. Be ready to share with others. Have some things on your mind that really stand out to you in terms of Living Word's vision for the future, and specifically the best is yet to come. What are some of the elements that are most exciting to you? I was on campus last week and I was driving down the road, and for the first time in all of my visits to Living Word, from the road I was able to look to my right and actually see the church as that dirt is being moved away and that hill is being reduced in size. And being able to not only see the church, but to be able to see and experience the impact that Living Word has had on the greater York community and Pennsylvania, and even the mission expression that extends around the world. There is a lot to be excited about. So have some of those things that really stand out to you in terms of vision, elements of the best is yet to come that are most exciting, and be ready in a conversational sort of way as you have the opportunity to share those with others at your table. Now, as I mentioned before, there will be some materials that will be distributed to people who attend your event, so we want you to have those materials. We want you to have those all packaged up. You know, one of the things that happens, sometimes churches will lay out all the materials at each place setting, and people will come in and they'll start diving into the material, and we don't want that to happen. Because as Pastor Steve, Pastor Brian, and others are speaking, we want people's attention to be focused on them, not their head down looking at a piece of literature or a brochure or something that's been placed at their table. So we want all the materials to be packaged up, and Pastor Steve, Pastor Brian, and others, perhaps John Hilliard, will call for those materials. They'll give you a heads up when those need to be used in your particular event. So be ready to distribute those at the appropriate time. Now, in certain situations, some of these venues, we will probably have discussion time built in. And discussion time can be a very, very fun time. It can be a very enjoyable experience, a cool part of the event that you're helping to facilitate. So we want you to be prepared for discussion time if it happens. And there are going to be some questions in all likelihood that church leaders will ask the people at your tables. So we want you to be ready to A, be aware of the questions that are going to be asked, be familiar with those questions, and then be ready to capture the response of the people at your table to the questions that are asked. What are some of the likely questions that will be out there during the discussion time? Well, number one, after the mission proposition is presented and Pastor Steve or Pastor Brian or both kind of work through that, talk about vision for the future, in all likelihood, they will ask a question along these lines. What did you hear tonight that really resonates most with you? And so we want you to draw responses out of people at your table, and we want to encourage you to capture those responses. You know, there are always people at the table who will be first in. They want to dive in and be first with their response. And by the same token, there are going to be people in all likelihood at your table that you're going to have to draw that response out of. They may be more shy, more retiring. So do your best as a table host to include everyone in the discussion. So the first question is going to be what resonates most, or what really connects with you as you listen to vision and project element. Secondly, we want to flip the coin. We want to look at the other side of the equation. What did you hear tonight that perhaps raised a question, a concern, or an issue as you listen? You know, having people in the room who have a heart for Living Word, being able to respond to that question, in a sense, that's like mining for gold. Number one, the feedback is going to be incredibly valuable for church leaders as you move forward. And number two, the people in the room will feel valued as a result of being asked to speak in to those two questions. A third question that's very, very important is, what did you hear tonight that could have been made more clear. Perhaps you had to think through it. It just wasn't as clear as it could have been. And then what is most exciting to you as you think about the best is yet to come? Now, in your particular setting, we may or may not have time for all of those questions, or Pastor Steve, Pastor Brian, John may change those questions up a bit, but you get the idea. Discussion may well occur in your setting, and discussion questions may well fall along those lines. So we want you to be ready for that and capture responses as people do answer those questions. Secondly, or next, I should say, it's actually Roman numeral 7 or 8, I believe, on your outline, probably 8. We want you to affirm the value of people providing feedback. You know, when it's appropriate, say, that's an excellent point, or that's a great question, things like that. We want people to feel like it's safe to provide that kind of feedback. So affirm their feedback, let them know that church leaders are desirous of receiving that feedback, that they're going to be viewing it, that they're going to be going over those responses, and that it's something that will help add value to the communication process that church leaders embark upon as we move deeper through the campaign. Encourage people to be very candid in their response. Of course, always steer conversations in a positive and edifying direction. And then we want to make sure that you warmly thank people for attending. We're talking about getting to the end of the event. Make sure that before anyone leaves your table, that you have an opportunity to go around the table, look them in the eye, and really, with sincerity of heart, thank them for investing their time in attending the event or the growth group that night. Now, what are some of the rewards for you doing what you're going to be doing as table hosts, as growth group leaders? Well, number one is increased effectiveness, awareness, and understanding. Again, as I mentioned, you all as leaders have a deeper level of understanding than probably 90% of people in the church, if that makes sense. Most of the people that will be seated around your table or in your group do not have the level of understanding that you possess. So you're going to be able to help them grow, and that's going to be so important in leading them to a deeper level of engagement. And a deeper level of engagement is absolutely necessary in order for people to arrive at a place where they're ready, willing, and able to make a wholehearted, sacrificial commitment to God's work at Living Word through the best is yet to come. I would encourage you to read through a couple of chapters of Scripture that really, from a biblical perspective, define an outstanding campaign. It's 1 Chronicles chapters 28 and 29. And you'll see that David begins that process of the building of the temple with a leader launch, just like you did a few days ago, gathering leaders together at Living Word to let them know prior to the rest of the church hearing all the detail about the best is yet to come, what's going to be coming. And so a leader launch was included in there, then vision casting, details about project elements and those kinds of things. Then you cycle over to 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verse 5. David gets his leaders together again. That's this thing called a leader commitment event that you'll be invited to, where you will be making your commitment in advance of the rest of the church. Now, between 1 Chronicles 28:1 and 1 Chronicles 29:5, a whole lot of stuff has to occur. Vision casting, rollout of project elements, people growing in their desire to really seek God and come to that place of having heard from Him in terms of what He's leading them to do. You know, at the end of the day, all we can ask of our people is to make a commitment that truly is pleasing to God. So you're going to be helping to create deeper levels of engagement so that people can respond in November with a willing response, with a deeper level of devotion, with this sense of wholeheartedness. What you're doing will help build strength and courage. And by that, I mean many people have not been through a campaign of this nature previously at Living Word or maybe in any other church experience. And so it can be a little bit anxiety filled on occasion to think about making a significant commitment over and above my regular giving at Living Word for the next 3 years. So you are in your role as you help create greater awareness and understanding by facilitating discussions and welcoming people and that sort of thing. You're going to be helping them to come to a place where there's greater likelihood that they will be filled with the faith, with the strength, and the courage that they need to follow God's leading in making a commitment. And then you're going to be, at the end of the day, helping to connect them to God's great work at Living Word and around the world. So there's going to be a deeper level of impact across the church and beyond the church because of what you are doing as a table host, a table hostess, or a growth group facilitator. Heart alignment, authentic worship. At the end of the day, when we can describe what God is going to use you to do in the hearts of people, it's to grow their hearts in greater alignment with the heart of God, which truly is authentic worship. When we arrive at that place, when we recognize that every single resource that we have, whether it's financial, whether it's our job, whether it's our marriage, our children, our health, whatever it is, it's a gift from the hand of a loving Father. Then we hold those resources with an open hand because we recognize that they're all His, and that truly is an expression of authentic worship. Now, if we had a summarizing statement of objective of your role, your responsibility, how God will use you in these particular situations, it would be this. And I would encourage you to take your pen and write it down right now. Our objective in how God is going to use you will be to help transfer ownership of the vision to everyone who considers Living Word to be their church home. Let me say that again. It's to help transfer ownership of the vision to everyone who counts Living Word to be their church home. In my work, as I partner with churches all across the country, I travel frequently. And in 99.9% of the cases, I'm renting a car as I travel. And I've been doing that for about the last 19 years or so. And every single time that I get ready to return that rental car to the airport when I'm flying out early the next morning, I always stop and fill the gas tank. I always return it filled with gas. And every time I fill that gas tank, it asks me two questions. Number one, do I want a receipt? And you're already thinking ahead of me. Number two, do you want a what? Car wash. Now, how many of you think that I've ever washed a car that's a rental car in 19 years of renting cars? The answer is, how many times have I done that? Absolutely never. Not one time have I hit yes for do I want a car wash. Why? Because it's a rental. Now, I've taken that rental car through medians when traffic is stuck. I've taken that rental car over curbs. I've done a variety of things. I don't mean to imply that I abuse them, but it's a rental car, right? You don't own it personally. You know that you're taking it back, that you're delivering it to the owner at the end of the day. By the same token, when I get home, we have two cars that get washed at least once a week, if not twice a week. Washed, vacuumed on the interior. The moral of the story is the things to which we attach ownership, we demonstrate an incredible level of care as compared to those things that we are only renting. And my suggestion to you as we wrap up our training today is that there are many people still attending Living Word Community Church who, in a sense, are renters. They're out there on the periphery. They're enjoying worship. They're enjoying excellent teaching. They're enjoying phenomenal children's ministry, next-gen ministry, that sort of thing. They may be plugged into a growth group and loving the relationships that they're establishing there, but they have never yet taken those demonstrative steps of ownership toward the ministry. And what you're doing will help transfer ownership to each and every person who considers Living Word to be his or her church home. So I just want to say thank you so much for your investment of time. I know Pastor Steve, Pastor Brian, John Hilliard are all blessed by your willingness to serve in this capacity, and we're trusting that God is going to use you in a great way to encourage the hearts of others and to advance his plan and his purposes through the best is yet to come. God bless you. Have a great day.